to Pulp for Contemporary Audiences. My name is Seth Lindberg. I do some editing for the Blackgate online magazine. And
you're the managing editor of Blackgate.
I am. I'm very understated too, so I'm learning how to better. You guys have imposter syndrome? Yeah, I got that. I am an amateur writer too. But I'm glad to be here moderating this panel. So I have a few housekeeping things to talk about, and then we'll delve into this introductions. So first off, I want to mention the USB drive. If you don't know about it, hopefully some of you guys are finally nodding your head. A lot of people haven't heard about this yet. Yeah. So this is a new endeavor. Started last year. It cost about $35 last year. They're down to $20 this year. So it contains contributions from most of the authors in the Writer Symposium. It has even cool stuff like audiobooks. Cat Rambo is a training on how to write horror novels. There's a couple of video games. We have video game writers that are a lot of novels and novellas, and it also has the entire digital contents of the anthology that they brought back this year. So there's a paperback anthology that represents 12 or 14 of the authors here, but that's also on here. So for $20, it's a great deal. It's a ton of content, and the proceeds also go toward like a travel fund to bring in marginalized authors or authors from far, because it costs a lot to attend a convention, as you might understand. And so it's a great cause, and it's well worth your money if you like to read and like the writers here. So please check that out. It's at the kiosk out front. There's like a coat check area type thing. You can get the anthology or this there. So please look at that. So we got roughly 50 minutes. We'll work in your questions. If you have a question, just raise your hand and I'll work you in. Okay. So let's do some introductions first. I'm going to start off with Gini in the back, and you can explain why you might be here.
Why I'm here?
Who you are and why
on this particular panel?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm like, why am I at GenCon? Why is that even a question? I'm Gini Koch. I write the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series for dog books. I also write under a variety of pen names and in all lengths and genres, including pulps. Pulp can kind of transcend everything, and I like pulp, so I work it into certain stories and certain genres, certain books.
Right. I'm Jason Ray Carney. I am an English professor at Christopher Newport University in Tidewater, Virginia. I'm also a writer. I have an independent press, Spiral Tower Press. We publish some zines. I think I'm on this panel because in terms of my academic scholarship, I wrote a monograph about Pulp Fiction, Between the Wars, Pulp Fiction, and its relationship to kind of canonical literature. So I'm really interested in like the history of pulps as like a print medium. But I think what we might be talking about on the panel is how like pulp is not just that like Between the Wars magazine, but it's like a trans-historical aesthetic, So anyhow, that's why I'm here.
I'm Howard Andrew Jones. I've been editing and writing in heroic fiction and sword and sorcery for several decades at this point. I also helped bring Harold Lamb's great historical swashbucklers back into print. And he was a big pulp author back at, around 1912, 1917 into the 1930s. That's my pulp connection, but I think sword and sorcery is sort of pulpy, and that's what I write. My newest series from Baen is I signed 5 books. The first 2 are out. The third's coming in October, and starring Hanavar. And that's probably why I'm here.
Richard?
I'm Richard Lee Byers. I written a variety of things, fantasy and horror mainly. You might know me from a bunch of Forgotten Realms books I wrote back in the day. The most important thing to mention today is that I have a story in Interdimensions, the GenCon Writers Symposium Anthology for 2024, which I'm quite proud of, and I hope you'll consider picking up. Most of my work, I think, shares, we talk about the aesthetic of pulp, I think that describes what I do, and obviously I didn't write for Weird Tales in 1935. I'm not that old, but I, like I said, I think that as far as the fundamental characteristics of Pulp Fiction, I probably got them pretty good.
Nice. We should do a call out too to our videographer, Sean Korsgaard, to do a 20-second introduction.
I am a U.S. Army veteran and award-winning photojournalist, formerly editor at Baen Books, and currently the editor at Iron Age Media, where I edit a pulp magazine by the name of Anvil and a sword and sorcery magazine by the name of Battleborn.
Wow. Thanks, man. So we'd be in this if we didn't talk about what pulp was, at least for a little bit, to get grounded before we go into contemporary. And it makes sense to pick on Jason first because you wrote a monograph on it. But I think everyone please chime in. But do you want to ground us on what pulp actually means or meant? Yep.
So it's a specific print medium. It was defined by it was specifically on the newsstand. So like one of the ways they saved monies was they eschewed the post office, so they would truck their pulps to the newsstand. So you had to actually go to the newsstand. One of the things was pulps had to use a cover to sell them because the way that the business model worked wasn't so much that the newsstand would buy they would take as much stock as they could get because there was nothing, there was no stakes for them to have pulps on the stand. So you'd have these. If you look at the pictures of newsstands from the 1930s, they're huge. Because why not add another one? I'm getting a little bit of money from this publisher. But then that means that you have to have these garish covers, these like eye-catching covers. That's gonna, and also, they were all fiction magazines. They were supposed to be entertainment, distraction. This is before television, So, I'm trying to think. Well, that's a good place to start, I think.
So, some of it's literally the paper they were printed on.
Yeah.
Right, was pulp paper. And that's how they got the nickname. But I think to add on to what Jason's saying, they were, I think the best description is lurid. The covers were lurid and the stories were lurid. Mike Hammer is a wonderful example of that, Mickey Spillane was proudly writing Pulp Fiction and gave us an iconic character from that. But I think most genre owes a lot to the pulps because they were genre stories. There was no literature there. It was all character-driven action, right? Which is what people turn into genre for, okay? You're not turning in to have somebody thoughtfully contemplate their life's woes. You're coming in so someone, the femme fatale is going to walk in and boom, and now our intrepid hero is off on an exciting chase where people are shooting at him or her and so forth. It's fun, it's action, it's adventure.
Well, sure, and those are really good points. I mean, you're sort of talking about some of the stuff that Black Mask established. Mm-hmm. Some of these things that we think of, oh, that's detective fiction, well, that began in the pulps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Chandler and Hammett, those guys that are now literary mystery stars, they were writing in the pulps.
Yeah.
I think it was Raymond Chandler who said whenever the story starts to slow down, have somebody come through the door with a gun.
Exactly.
And I mean, I talk about the aesthetic of Pulp Fiction. I feel like, it's fast-paced. It tends to emphasize whatever is colorful and exciting to some degree over what is realistic. It's, as you said, full of action, and, that's kind of, what I try to do in my stuff.
Yeah.
It also it has an interesting relationship with formula. Like there is a lot of Pulp Fiction that you can't read today. It's just unbearable because it's so formulaic. But actually when the pulp magazines took their final form, they were all genre based. Like you get some really narrow genres. Like there's an actual pulp called Ranch Romances where it's all westerns with the romance, right? It narrows down. So part of what is we call pulp, I think there's a formula element. Obviously, if you know everything that's going to happen, it's not fun. But to some extent, there is this kind of the reader wants something that's familiar to some extent, right? I haven't worked that out yet, but
Talk about the narrow genre. There's one of the Zeppelin stories or something like that.
Yeah. But I mean, Harlequin's made a lot of money on repetition. It's the same thing with different characters, and you know the outcome, and yet you're going to buy it and read it because that's the same thing with in a detective story. You expect the detective to find who did it. Okay.
Who done it?
Who done it? Right? And how happy that ending is depends on if you're doing noir or not. In noir, there's not a happy ending.
Right.
Right? So, but if you're just doing a straight on, hard-boiled whatever, you can have hard-boiled that isn't noir, but you can't have noir without hard-boiled. Is kind of how I
There's kind of a middle ground where the detective catches the killer and justice is done, and you feel good that the case is the case is satisfactorily resolved, but the detective is fundamentally still stuck in his shitty life.
Yeah. Well, we can't have another case if he's not stuck in that life.
Yeah, it's like Lauren Estelman's Amos Walker's series.
Yes.
It's kind of like that, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
What's really weird about detective fiction, Pulp Fiction, because it's associated with this like, prose style that there's no excess words, everything is almost like a Carpenter, technically like fits snug together, which is weird because pulp writers tended to, they got paid by the word, and there are other like weird tales. There's some very florid writers who are trying to milk as much as they can out. So I think it's interesting because sometimes we talk about pulp, we talk about a prose style that is very kind of shorn of any superfluities, but like.
Not always.
Not always. And sometimes it's like Clark Ashton Smith, where it's just over, flowing with excess word.
Well, wasn't there some pulp writer who said every time when he's describing a shootout, every time he writes bang, it's another nickel?
Do you think it lends itself toward only short fiction, or is there a novel serialized version of the pulp?
Oh yeah, you were talking about Mickey Spillane.
Yeah, because those are
Yeah.
novels. Yeah, absolutely. As we're talking, I'm like, okay, so every novel I've written is pulp. In one way or another.
I
I
mean-
mean, I think that action adventure, Haggard.
H. Rider Haggard?
Yes, his stuff's all pulp. It's great. It's great. Alan Quartermain, that was the words I was thinking we're trying to get. The Alan Quartermain stories, they're great. They're pulp, but they're great. And they're novels.
I think that pulp, novels that are fundamentally pulp today can hit the bestseller list. I love the Douglas Preston Lincoln Child books, and I think they're very much pulp.
Yeah. I agree.
Is there something specific about them that you think that?
Well, they all hinge on some kind of fantastic occurrence or gimmick, and the ones that, particularly the ones about Special Agent Pendergast, have this kind of Sherlock Holmes-ish, larger than life protagonist, and they always move right along. It's although he does do the thing where that a lot of modern thriller writers do, where every once in a while, there's that kind of exposition that shows you we really know our stuff when we're talking about submarines or the Rocky Mountains or whatever the hell it is.
Yeah, so we think about, pulp seems to be partially defined on the medium it was, and on maybe the time, I guess, the time period of the mid-wars. But obviously things have changed. People don't necessarily go to the newsstands now to buy their stuff. So let's think about the transition of that media over time, and see if you can comment on maybe how it's transformed, or maybe how it is today too, depending on which.
Well, it transitioned into bookstores. So newsstands started dying in most cities as your media got different. As soon as television came in, you don't necessarily need a paper. Honestly, show of hands, who is buying a physical paper anymore? Is anyone in the audience, have you bought a physical paper in the last few months? One
we got
gentleman.
one.
Two,
Two.
three, okay, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we've got like 4 people out of a full room.
Yeah, of
So-
readers, and right.
Right, so I think that as soon as television changed a lot of landscapes, so as soon as that comes in, your newsstands, especially in your smaller cities, obviously, New York could maintain the newsstands the longest. Los Angeles, however, that's a driving city. So I can think of one newsstand I saw growing up in my lifetime in Southern California, because you're driving, you're not walking. You're not screeching over the corner, I need the daily paper. You're just going to drive home and turn on Walter Cronkite and watch the news. So I think by that, they transitioned intelligently to get more into bookstores and markets and all the racks, where the comics are, you also could find pulps. And I think that was a smart transition.
And let's not forget the paperbacks and how in World War II, some publishers started making slim paperbacks so that the GIs could fit them into their pocket or their rucksack. And then after the war, those publishers, they're doing paperback originals, gold medal paperback originals, some of which are many of which are frickin' wonderful, noir and detectives and westerns, and they were all that short novel length, like 60,000 words, 50,000 words, and that kind of helped kill the pulps as well, because people would buy these. The men were used to reading these little paperbacks, and there they were on the newsstand rather than the pulp magazines. That was another nail in the coffin of the pulps, even though many of these novels carried on very pulpy traditions.
A lot of them just transitioned the pulp into that,
I mean, if you're John D. MacDonald, or Richard S. Prather,
you moved right over. They moved you right. I mean, I think the same with Mickey Spillane. They moved them. Oh yeah, you were doing really well in pulp. We're just going to give you a slightly different format. It's like we're moving from mass market into trade, because trade is the cheapest POD, print on demand. And therefore, we're going to see mass market disappearing, because it's not as inexpensive as it used to be. And a lot of those are driven by cost. Economics drives much more than we realize.
And of course, we're going through another change now, right? Everyone knows the last 5 years, at least, maybe more, the brick and mortar, bookstores are kind of transformed a lot, and people are not even necessarily going to TV for news anymore. It's just streamed in different ways. So, where do you think the trajectory is going for this? I guess is for pulp for me now. I guess
it's interesting, because with pulp, I think that there's this term escapism. Like when we read pulp, we're trying to basically we're not. I don't know about you, but when I sit down for with a Black Library, novel, I'm not trying to think about current events. I'm trying to escape from the world, right? So we've been using literary material to quote unquote escape from the world. The Gothic novel, the yellow books in the Victorian period, pulp magazines, those James Bond novels in the '60s, all this stuff. So what literary material are people using to escape their daily lives today? I mean, I think it takes, honestly, a lot of my experience, it takes the form of like Bain. There are certain publishers who publish that kind of material, right? I'll keep with the example of Black Library. I think that's a kind of modern day pulp. Game tie-in fiction is modern day pulp. You can have artistically ambitious pulp. I don't know if you've ever read The Horus Heresy. I'm sorry if you probably have a friend who talks too much about it, but the first 3 novels of The Horus Heresy are like high art, but I still think it's pulp. But then also, to tie a bow on this, the Kindle, I think a lot of people are kind of reading their quantity escapism fiction through Kindle editions. They just,
Again, I can make the case for pulp in everything I write. Probably, I can walk through and probably make a case for everything everybody else is writing. I just feel it's baked into genre by now.
Okay, so we can talk about that for a second. We think about, what's for the aspiring writers in the room that may want to incorporate pulp elements and to write and then maybe publish something like that. What methods or processes do you think you might have to help someone start a pulp store?
I'm with what Richard said. Anytime it slows down, have someone walk in with a gun.
That's beautiful. Yes.
Or a laser, or an alligator, or whatever it is that you need to keep it interesting.
I think that maybe to write successful modern pulp, you want to keep all the virtues like the like I said, the fast pace, the action and stuff, while maybe paying a little more attention than the original pulp writers had to make it all feel kind of plausible, and maybe in some cases maybe kind of deepening the characterization a little bit.
I'll tell you, I don't know about plausible. My main series features aliens that are living and hiding on Earth, and they look like supermodels. So, I got 16 books out with 4 more coming, and Daw has never once said, "We just don't believe that's possible." So, if you write it well enough, if you make your characters, really, it's going to come down to your characters and your voice. If your voice is good and is unique, and your characters are people that your readers want to find out what they want to stay with, and they're doing fun, interesting, exciting, world-saving things, or person-saving things, or animal-saving things, anything that's interesting and fun that a reader would want to be along for that ride, I think you get published.
A story that's vital and has momentum and grabs you at the beginning with an interesting character or situation and just keeps you interested in what's happening, like a good Indiana Jones movie.
Right.
Which are totally
Yeah.
pulp.
Well, I mean, I do think plausibility is partly, determined by genre, It's like,
Okay. I like that.
yeah, I mean, I've written some prose superhero stuff. My most recent novel I had out was a superhero novel from Green Ronin based on their Mutants and Mastermind series. It's like, and if somebody said to me, well, it's not physically possible for this character to fly, I would be saying, well, why the hell are you reading this?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'd like to say something that might be polemic here, throw a grenade in the room. I think that pulp writers have to be more aware of craft than kind of literary writers. Like literary writers are able to indulge and kind of do their own thing, right? And they have a lot, but where your readers, if you're a pulp writer, are much more demanding. Like they need to have certain needs satisfied, and so I think that's why I'm trying to wrap my mind about why are some of the greatest writers from the pulp magazines, Spillane, Hammett, Chandler. I think it's because their readers are making demands on them that maybe a James Joyce. James Joyce is going to do whatever he wants to do, right? And if you like it or not, doesn't matter, right? With the pulp writer, you have to satisfy an editor, you have to satisfy readers.
Yeah, if James Joyce puts you to sleep, you blame yourself.
Yeah.
If I put you to sleep, you blame me.
Oh, that's nice. You said it. You said it.
I'm thinking of the origin of the pulps needing a flashy cover to draw people in, and also appeal to people that might, may not have, I don't know if they have the attention span or not, but they certainly want to be engaged from the get-go, which seems to be similar to what we have now electronically. We'll get to your question next. Yeah, I think the question of, trying to think of the current medium of electronic browsing and consumption.
Your cover's still a cover.
The
Covers still
cover
matter.
should be,
Your cover has one job and only one job, and that is to make a reader pick up the book and look at it or click on it to take a look. Then once they've done that, your cover's job is done.
So do you think a pulpy cover is different than another cover?
No, I don't. I think its whole job was to make, its whole job is the same job of every cover here, every cover in the hall, everything else, to make the reader go, oh, that's interesting, what's this? The back cover blurb has one job and one job only, and that is to make you take the book, read that and go, oh, and open the book. Right? Those are jobs, and those jobs have never changed. And I think, if you look at the very boring covers, they're almost always on literary or literary within the genre. Because the cover is making you, oh, it's just an apple and light. Well, by the time you got there, okay, it was like, oh, this is wonderful, right? And you those readers were going to buy that book no matter what. But somebody else looking at that, it makes you kind of feel like, ooh, it's literary, even though it wasn't. So the cover's doing a job, and the pulps did that job really, really well.
Right.
And if you can continue to get covers that do that job as well, you're in great shape.
I have it in mind. I'm trying to think. So if you're writing a story, should you kind of picture what your cover should be to kind of go along with it?
Oh God, no.
No?
Okay, I don't. I have over 70 titles.
Okay.
Okay, I have art directed exactly 2. One was terrible, one is great. Okay, and why was the one that's great? Because I had a lot more titles when I had to art direct that one than I did with the other one. Authors are notoriously terrible. That's why you have cover artists who should at least have a synopsis of your book or have read your book, who are going to come up and say, I know which elements to pull out of. I'm very fortunate. Dan Dos Santos did the first 12 covers of my Alien series. I don't tell Dan what to draw, except for one book. And he doesn't tell me what to write. And it's the same thing there.
You had a question, sir?
I did, and this goes back to, you had mentioned in one series you had 16 titles. Most readers will say that an author hits a stride after they really finish and flesh out the developed character. and authors tend to feel like each book has its own stride. So over a course of 16 books, do you feel like your earlier work, before you hit the series stride, was more in the pulp feel? Or
I'd tell you the whole series is still in a pulp feel.
so you feel like
I write in
it's
a-
been consistent, not more
I write
developed towards the
I
end?
write in a thriller style.
Mhm.
Okay, short chapters, cliffhanger endings, boom, 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 boom. I do a mystery build, and then it's whatever genre I'm writing is the overlay. That happens to be science fiction. I can tell exactly what book everything clicked right, and it's book 4.
I find book 4 is the
Book
most complex.
Book 4 in my series, that's Alien Proliferation, is where I realized books 1, 2, and 3 are great, okay? It's running along, you love the characters, blah, 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 but I know as a writer, that's where I clicked in on several of the supporting characters and made them better and made them really click in for reasons, and honestly, they couldn't have clicked in earlier in the series. So no, I like I said, everything I write, I could drill down everything, including my short fiction, down to the pulps, because I like that. I want action and adventure with whatever else is going on. So no, and I think every author is different too. I mean, Laurel, speaking of Laurel Eskelman told me, you know, those of us who write quickly, don't be embarrassed, okay? If you wrote the best book you could write at that time, you remain proud of that book for the rest of your life. And I believe him, because he's awesome.
Is there a question? Go ahead, sir.
More a comment I'm hoping that to comment on. So it sounds like what I'm hearing is that there maybe isn't a well-definable genre or even market called pulp. You want to write fiction, but you just use pulp elements. Is that fair to say?
Pulp elements or pulp approach maybe is how I would say it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think you want to write the best book you can write. If the characters don't interest you, they're not going to interest anybody else. If you don't laugh at the jokes, no one's going to laugh at the jokes. Okay, that doesn't mean that all your jokes are going to be funny and all your jokes will land. But if you aren't laughing, nobody's going to be laughing. If you aren't excited when you're reading, one of the most important things I learned way back was when I do rereads, which I do a lot, when I'm writing, if I'm skimming an area, I have to go back and say, why am I skimming this? Oh, in this case, I'm skimming it because I already know it's perfect and I'm jumping ahead. In most cases, I've bored myself.
Oh, no.
So that's going to get chopped up, cut, done, and done away with. So I think it was Richard's point or Howard's, I don't remember, but how important craft is. Craft is vitally important in genre. Not only for reader expectations. If you don't know what the reader expectations are, you cannot subvert them. Okay? You're allowed to subvert them if you know what you're doing. Flailing about and saying, oh, I'm writing a romance that doesn't have a happily ever after or a happily for now because I'm a rebel. No, you just don't know what you're doing. The expectation in that genre, if the word romance is in there anywhere, is a happily ever after, a happily for now. If you can't do that, you're not writing a romance, and stop lying to yourself because no one's going to believe you.
On that question, there are people writing neo-pulp, like, I can't remember his name, but still with The Shadow still going, the Spider. There's the Pulp Fest, which is going on right now. There are writers, there are panels of authors who are still doing almost pastiche of like 1930s style pulp heroes and stuff. So I wish I knew this writer's name.
I knew it until you said that. But I do know who you're talking about. Yeah. He's written Tarzan, he's written Doc Savage, he's written The Shadow.
Yeah.
So what I'd be curious about is if there was a pulp master, if you will, that informed any of your own writing or maybe elements, an example of how you've incorporated pulp into some of your craft.
Conan. So, I mean, that's pulp at some of its finest. The imagery, the descriptions, we're in an alien world, and it feels very real, even though it doesn't. And it's not like it's not like Howard filled the world with, long laborious description. He gave you the description you needed and not a word more. So,
Jason?
I would say Robert E. Howard too, but I'm trying to think if I can be more. I think that Jack Vance, his weirdness, kind of the way he's able to render wonder and strangeness, but also kind of make you laugh. Like I think that's something that I've is he a pulp writer? I don't know. Yeah, he's a pulp writer.
I would count him. I mean, he's science fiction, but yeah, I could boil him down to pulp.
Well, both Robert E. Howard and Vance influenced me, as well as Fritz Leiber and the wondrous Lee Brackett.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and a number of the Black Mask writers, because I love that economy of style. I love Chandler and Hammett, and I've just for the last 10 minutes been trying to remember another of my favorite Black Mask writers, so I absolutely adore him.
Is that Cornell Wall?
No, it's not. Anyway,
But then John Stark.
Sorry?
John Stark. Who was it?
John Stark, that was Lee Brackett.
That was Lee Brackett,
Oh.
yeah, those wonderful Sword and Planet and space opera. I mean, she was called the Queen of Space Opera, but her space opera kind of blended with Sword and Planet. And she's probably best known today for writing the first draft of Empire Strikes Back, but she's had so much more. This wonderful catalog. But probably the most important of all the pulp writers to me was Harold Lamb, who I mentioned earlier. Later in life, he became a historian and wrote all these biographies. And the first thing I ever read by him was a biography of Hannibal of Carthage, which I just loved and read over and over and over in high school. And then I loved it so much, I read his stories about the swashbuckling Cossack, which was some of the first fiction he got published. And those are episodic stories that fit one into the other. It's like a season of television following it's actually Cleet or Clit, I don't know. Him wandering from place to place in ancient Russia and finding the tomb of Genghis Khan, which has all these terrible traps in it. I mean, it's great stuff. And each story follows the other. And so much of this series is because of him. I loved how the episodes fit so closely into one. A character introduced here would come back in another story. So I took that from, but also I fell in love with Hannibal, and my main character is inspired by Hannibal of Carthage. So that's clearly the most influential of all of the writers, among pulp writers for me.
Okay. Well, I've been influenced by Howard, so like everybody else, and Vance, and Fritz Leiber, and L. Sprague de Camp, Fletcher Pratt, and Paul Anderson, a bunch of people. In Private Eye stuff, I guess I've been influenced by Chandler mainly. And
This is driving me crazy. I'm gonna look up that writer.
but my, I don't know. I guess the writer that got me into the genre of the fantastic period when I was a kid, and I was like just, I read his stuff obsessively over and over again when I was a kid. I think I've read every novel he's written, which is a lot, was Edgar Rice Burroughs. And I can't read him today because with the same attitude, because I'm conscious of issues in his work that I was not conscious of when I was a kid. H.P. Lovecraft is another writer like that. I think that what is good about his work is still magnificently good, but I see issues and problems with it now that I didn't see when I was a kid. And I cannot reread it now. It's not just the racism thing, although obviously that's there, but it's like I tried to reread The Shadow over Innsmouth a couple years back, and the way that story opens is a character walks into, it was kind of a typical Lovecraftian central character, walks into a bus station to buy a bus ticket to Innsmouth because he wants to check out the colonial architecture or some shit, and the guy who's behind the counter selling tickets, spontaneously gives him this massive chunk of exposition, which is the whole history of Innsmouth, and it's like, that would never happen. It's not recalled,
Let me just, sorry.
Please, go ahead.
So I had to use the internet to help me, but my other favorite Black Mask writer is a fellow named Frederick Nebel, and he's one of my favorites. I can't believe I blanked on him. But he was big in Black Mask the whole run of the magazine, but unfortunately, when things began to be anthologized and talked about and celebrated, he didn't allow his stories to be picked up. So unlike Chandler and Hammett, they weren't reprinted, and so they almost got forgotten. Recently, in the last 8 years, Altus Press has been reprinting them, and I highly recommend the Cardigan stories. That's the detective's name, and it's not quite midway between Hammett and Chandler. It's very Hammett-esque, where it's these short, choppy sentences, but there's a little more warmth to it, and he has these wonderful, quirky descriptions that are part of it as well. And if you like the sort of knight in a battered trench coat feel, then those are going to have it. Also, he's really famous for his McBride and Kennedy stories. And I'd say if you're at all curious about him, I'd try the last 2 volumes first. That's when he's really hitting his stride. Cardigan's good right from the start for some reason. But the McBride and Kennedy stories, some of his finest work, the last 2 of the 4 volumes are just wonderful detective fiction. If you like those, go back and try the others. But you might stall out like I did. I've been told that this guy was great. Read McBride and Kennedy. So the first thing I read was the first McBride and Kennedys, and then I didn't explore them for a few more years.
Yeah, and we have a question
Yeah,
here.
I just remember the name of the guy that's writing the news stories about the Shadow and Doc Savage and whatever. It's Will Murray.
Oh, yeah.
Jeez, I knew that.
I've been on the panel with him.
So actually,
We won't tell him you couldn't remember.
I took a course of yours, Howard, about writing, and there was a topic about how to improve your economy of words in writing. And there was Don Westlake.
Donald Westlake, Richard Stark,
Yeah.
the Parker novels.
Yeah,
Those are so good.
Those are so good. Talk about wonderful
I'm
economy.
going to do a testimony first, because to me, it was super. I didn't read. I've never read anything that was that engaging so quickly before.
Well, his opening sentences.
His opening, and you said it'd be like that. And I'm like, yeah, people say that, but okay, I'm going to buy and try it. But if you have, go more. I just want to do a testimony.
Yeah, sure.
I've never seen anything.
So the opening sentence of one of them is, when the phone rang, Parker was in the garage killing a man. You can read the next sentence, right?
What's the last name?
Westlake. Well, actually, he wrote those under his Richard Stark pseudonym. But his real name is Donald Westlake, and there's a long run of those. I don't mind having mismatched editions. I mean, I have all sorts of beat up paperbacks, but I love that one so much. I knew I'd keep referring to it and going back and reading it. University of Chicago Press came out with a matched set of them recently, and I slowly accumulated the entire set. And by God, I have gone back and reread them. Reading them, it seems like it's simple at first, but it's more like, okay, this is a beat up car with an amazing engine in it. The writing may seem simple and direct, but there's a whole lot of power under the hood. And oh my God, is the momentum propulsive. You're halfway through it before you even realize what's going on.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, they're heist and caper novels, and a lot of people have trouble with conference room scenes, but if you want to see how to do a good conference room scene where they're discussing the heist, and you can keep track of all the characters, read him. There's all kinds of reasons to read him, but there's
the first 3 of his series kind of have a story arc, so you don't have to get all of them. The first 3 is kind of there's a question here.
So actually, before I walked in, I was trying to think of what pulp was, like me, and I always figured like just Lovecraft was noir, Conan, all that did strike me as pulp. Coming in here, and you guys talking, I was like, okay, it's a little bit more than that. So I'm trying to like really boil down the basics of it, and like I know there's mystery in it. Like I think mystery seems to be a big part of pulp, and I guess a lack of mystery with a lack of information. That seems to be like some of the drives that you like. Even Conan going through like he's going through the histories and stuff. You read I forget there's one where he's in a forest, of course, and doing something. But you learn about the history as it goes on. Would you say there's what other are there other elements that I'm maybe missing with pulp now that you guys are talking? Like those are the 2 kind of basics. But is there anything else you would recommend that really kind of push pulp forward in your writing or in like a description?
Well, you're usually dealing with a character who's not struggling to find themselves. They're already fully capable. Think Indiana Jones. When he steps on this stage, he already knows what he's doing and how to do it. Now, he may not know where this thing is. He's got to find the secret. Like you said, hidden backstory. We don't know the character's backstory. We don't have like 3 chapters explaining their childhood and all their trauma. So that's part of what pulls you forward too. You want to know more about how this character got to be the way they are, rather than laying it all out in front first.
Right, you meet Marion and you find a whole new layer.
Yeah.
Right. The minute she's on the screen, there's a whole new layer that you did not see coming. So, but that makes perfect sense for the character. So yeah, but that's all craft. It's giving you, it's dribbling in the information as you, the reader, need it, as opposed to, you know, if this was a how to write panel, somebody in the audience, and you all know who you are, would be standing at me. So my first 7 chapters are about how the world was created, and I'm like, cut it. Cut it right now. Okay, and they'll keep going, and it's like, this is you barking, and this is us being the wrong tree. Cut it, right? So nobody wants that. Maybe they want it in literary fiction, but they do not want it in genre. And if they don't want it in genre, they didn't want it in the pulps. I really, really can make a case that the pulps affected genre fiction all the way up to present day. And readers still want that. They want what the pulps gives. Action, adventure, excitement, and a character or characters you want to follow within whatever genre or crossover genre you're writing in.
I think there's tension there, because it seems like the advice or approach is to almost start at the climax or something, but then you want to make sure that the reader is engaged somehow.
Touched by an alien, I have an alien sprout wings and start attacking people in the first chapter.
Yeah. Well, didn't Nikki Spillane say the first chapter sells this book and the last chapter sells the next book?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, Jason?
There was a comment back there.
Oh, two. Okay.
Just
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think on the detective side, it certainly leans toward noir in the sense that morality is gray. Ultimately, they're good people, but they're not paladins, right? There's a certain sense of moral ambiguity. They're a gray area. And Conan's another one that I think, when you look at him, he's not going out to right wrongs. He's pretty much in it for himself, but he's never going to do something truly terrible to someone who doesn't deserve it.
Well, I don't know if that's would describe all pulp. I mean, Doc Savage is a pretty moral guy, you know.
Doc Savage is a good example of being a good guy. Yeah, I totally agree with you there.
And I mean, in
Koch.
Yeah, and in contemporary stuff, your books, which are, kind of pulp descendant, I would say, Hanovar is obviously a good guy, you know.
Jason?
Well, I'm sorry. I think that's a compelling point about the moral dynamics of pulp protagonists. But I wanted to say that I think the serialized character is part of pulp. The character development does happen, but it often happens off screen. So like if you like Conan, to use that, like Conan goes from being this impetuous youth to being the king, bearing responsibility. But you don't see the development happening when you're reading the stories. It's like when you're actually with the character in the world of the story, the development has, to some extent, the development has happened. I don't know. I think I can make a case that like character development happens, quote unquote, off screen to these serialized pulp characters. I don't know.
In a lot of cases, yeah, I would agree. Not all, but I think in a lot.
Sure.
Going back to kind of the origins of the pulp stories and the pulp magazines, these were a lot of collections with a lot of different authors. And you mentioned Lovecraft, and famously Howard and Clark Ashton Smith were part of the Lovecraft circle of writers that didn't collaborate so much as communicate or speak with one another. Do you think that that's something that still follows through with anthology works or magazines now, where it's kind of getting into that community and having other authors work with you that just adds to the, I guess, the pulpiness, for lack of a better term, with pulp?
I think it adds to the camaraderie. I mean, like we will talk to each other, and I have lots of friends that are not writing in my genre that I talk to, or that are writing in my genre. I mean, I think it's one of the advantages of today is that it's actually easier to have relationships with other people because of the internet. That, if you didn't live in the same city, you were writing letters back in the day, and that writing a letter takes time from writing your book. So some people were very, very, very big letter writers, right? I mean, really, it depends on who's pulling the anthology or the magazine together. The editor, just like in the old days, is driving what they want. They're saying this is the call, right? I want stories within this. I was just in the green room and someone was talking to other authors about what they want in the anthology that they are editing. I'm doing this, and here's how I want, here's what I want, you need to make sure you have this in it, and so forth. And others are just like, yeah, if it's on the theme, as close as you can get it to the theme, we're good. So it just depends. But yeah, I think the camaraderie absolutely helps. I mean, you know, hearing what Richard and Howard are doing, what Jason's doing, even if it's just on this panel, is helpful to me.
Yeah, there is the occasional true collaborative project. One of the things I'm currently involved with is the Basil and Mobius series, which Ryan Schifrin, who's a Hollywood guy, created. And the current book, I'm contributing 2 stories, and other writers are contributing 1 or 2 stories, and we'll put it all together, and it'll read like a novel, we hope, at the end. But it's all, you know, it's all ultimately one big story and one set of characters. So, you know, once in a while there's a project like that.
Okay.
Cool. Sir?
Any hint, this one might be just for you, Seth, but any hints on, for folks, writers who want to maybe submit to like your magazines and things like that in terms of the
And that might be
process of success?
You know, that might be genre dependent, actually. Though I think it's a good question of the crowd about maybe I don't have time to cover all, but like where you know, where are the current markets? Where's kind of pulpy things going? I can admit I'm more on the sword and sorcery side, and I can speaking of the community, I can call out Jason Ray Carney. He's known for starting a Discord channel for pulpy sword and sorcery, and there's a kind of associated with the weird kind of weird tales version as well. You can kind of submit to an amateur market and also participate in the community.
That's called Whetstone. It's the
Whetstone.
Whetstone Discord. Whetstone with an H. You know
Yeah,
that.
yeah. No, I think but each different subgenre pulp probably has its own community, and of course that's probably changing over years. It might be good to seek out one of those so you can learn about opportunities as well as be with a bunch of buddies.
Horror writers that you're looking for that are, you know, in terms of the magazines that you're editing. Or
Oh no, Blackgate Online magazine. No, they're not. Blackgate used to have a paper version which was accepting and printing stories, and now it's more of a news
Maybe throw it
source.
to Sean.
Sean would be a good one. Yeah, you could hit up. He definitely has the current ones. He definitely should talk to him. We have like just a couple minutes left too. Maybe I don't know if there's any.
One more question.
Okay, we just maybe you could say any last thoughts and maybe about where you see where pulp is going in the future. But we only have 2 minutes, so thoughts to the crowd there.
I
on
think pulp's going where it's been going, right into the popular culture. Also, I'll be doing a signing from 1 to 2 in the far back wall, right on the back side of Authors Avenue, from 1 to 2. So please come by.
Yeah, there's you.
Real quick, pulp authorship is different than literary authorship. And it does not a value judgment, right? So pulp writers tend to be more open to collaboration and input from editors, input from readers. So and that's when you're saying cut certain things out. Like pulp writers need to be more hospitable to interactions with a variety of people. So that's my last.
Yeah.
As far as where it's going right now, for the first time in years, I feel like, sword and sorcery is my great love. And I feel like sword and sorcery, for the first time in years, seems like it's on the upswing. I mean, I have a 5-book deal from a major publisher, and there's all of these wonderful small press and medium-sized press that are prospering. Every time I turn around, there's a new one with wonderful stories in them. So I'm excited, and I hope that it continues to build, and that Sword and Sorcery will once have an actual seat at the table. For a while there, for 20, 25 years, it's felt like there's no room at the major table except for epic doorstop fantasy, and now Sword and Sorcery is back, so that feels great. As far as me, you can find me online occasionally at howardandrewjones.com. On Facebook, I'm howardandrewjones.1. Just look for the guy who's always talking about Sword and Sorcery. And I have a signing tomorrow at 4 o'clock. I'd love to see if you ever want to stop by. Oh, I got free bookmarks.
And Richard, you have a couple seconds to yell and scream if you can.
Okay, I'll buy the Interdimensions, the GenCon Writers Symposium anthology. I got a story in there, and
Cool.
it's a cool book.
Well, thank you, everyone.